At the end of December, on a bitterly cold day that felt like everything might freeze over. We were running a little late as we headed to the venue for our year-end party. When we arrived at the Italian bar that served as the venue, there was a person standing at the entrance. "Madison? What are you doing out here in this freezing cold? Your face is so pale, and you're shaking. Why aren't you going inside?" Megan said this to Madison, a new hire, who responded with a strained smile. "They told me, a country bumpkin with only a high school diploma has no place at this party. Why don't you just wait outside?" As she said this, her forced smile dissolved, and she began to cry. While heading to the venue together, my junior, Megan, exclaimed angrily, "Those guys," and exchanged glances with me. "James, is it okay if I give them a piece of my mind?" She rolled up her sleeves, ready to storm into the bar, but I calmly stopped her. "Leave this to me," I said, before calling someone on my phone. "My name is James. I'd been told my mother passed away giving birth to me. My father, having lost his beloved wife, initially kept his distance from me, but maybe because I resembled her, even as a boy. By the time I was old enough to remember, my memories were filled with my father's overwhelming affection for me. Still, raising a child alone must have been hard. During my preschool years, I was often sent to stay with my grandmother, so I don't have many memories of my father from that time. Thankfully, my father earned enough money for us not to struggle financially. But after I entered elementary school and my grandparents moved into a care facility, I often ate meals alone at home, feeling lonely and isolated. Hoping to spend more time with my father and help him in some way, I started learning how to cook. For a grade schooler, I think I did pretty well. Once I got the hang of cooking, I even started making my father's lunch for him. Hearing him say, "Thank you, it's delicious," brought me so much joy, and I became more and more invested in cooking. While weekdays were often lonely, my father made time for me on weekends. Those weekends were precious to me, my one chance each week to be with him. During weekdays, I spent most of my time reading books that had belonged to my mother. Though I had no memories of her, reading the books she had collected gave me a sense of what had moved her heart, what kinds of stories she had loved. It made me feel connected to her and helped ease my loneliness. Eventually, I became a voracious reader, completely hooked on books. In preschool, the other kids would ask, "Why doesn't James have a mom?" By the time I entered elementary school, rumors got worse. James's mom must have cheated and left him. I saw that on TV, or poor James, his dad's probably so strict because his mom isn't around. The baseless gossip made me hesitant to make friends, and I ended up spending most of my time alone. That's why books became like dear friends to me. Even though I was a loner at school, things changed when I was in 4th grade. "All right, everyone, take your seats. We have a new friend to introduce today. Nice to meet you all. My name is Matthew, and we've just moved to this area. I love playing sports. Looking forward to getting to know everyone." Matthew, a bright and friendly boy with great athletic skills, quickly became a popular figure in the class. It was about a month after Matthew joined. I was sitting alone, as usual, reading a book. "Hey! That's a great book. Do you like it?" Matthew had come over to talk to me. "Yeah. This is my 5th time reading this series, but it never gets old." That's how Matthew and I bonded over books. On days when Matthew didn't have club activities after school, the two of us would go to the library, read together, and share our thoughts about the stories. One day, during a casual conversation, I mentioned to Matthew that, being from a single-father household, I often ate my meals alone. He immediately responded, "Why don't you come over and eat at my house? You're always welcome." I was thrilled and eagerly accepted his invitation to visit his home. "James. Welcome. Oh, so you're James? Matthew always talks about you. Come on in before the food gets cold." Matthew and his mother warmly welcomed me, and I sat down at their dining table. It was dinner time, but Matthew's father wasn't around. Curious, I tilted my head, wondering if he was working. Then Matthew said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, we're a single-mother household." I was a little surprised but simply replied, "I see." I know very well how much I hated it when I talked to my classmates about being from a single-parent family. They would look at me with pity or curiosity, and it made me uncomfortable. But when I told Matthew about it, he treated me the same as always, talking to me normally and even inviting me out for a meal like this. I also never bring it up, and the way I treat him hasn't changed at all. That seemed like the best approach. Then I took a bite of the meal Matthew's mother had prepared. It was incredibly delicious. The food I'd made for myself or the meals I'd cooked with my father on weekends were great too, but this felt fundamentally different. So this is what they mean by a mother's cooking. I silently marveled, deeply moved. Matthew and his mother watched as I quietly wiped away a tear, eating enthusiastically while muttering, "It's delicious. If you'd like, James, you're welcome to come eat here anytime." From that day on, I began having dinner at Matthew's house about twice a week. Their kindness gave me so much comfort, but as life often goes, partings come unexpectedly. In 6th grade, my father's job required us to move, and I had to change schools. This meant I had to leave Matthew behind. Still, he was my best friend. Even after we started middle school, we stayed in touch. During summer and winter vacations, we'd visit each other and chat about anything and everything. One summer vacation during my 2nd year of middle school, Matthew approached me with a serious, slightly hesitant expression. "Hey, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course." "What's going on?" I asked. He explained that his mother was getting remarried. He wanted to support her happiness, but he couldn't help feeling conflicted. He opened up and shared everything he was feeling. "Though there wasn't much I could do," Matthew said, "James, you're the only one who truly knows about my family situation. Being able to talk to you about this means a lot." That gave me the courage to open up about my own struggles. I haven't really been able to fit in at my new school. We both shared things we couldn't even tell our families, solidifying our bond as irreplaceable best friends. After graduating from middle school, I went on to high school. While I considered going to college, I wanted to start working in a field I was passionate about, which is books. After graduating from high school, I began working as an editor at a publishing company. The deadlines were relentless, and I often worked late into the night, barely getting any sleep. But just being surrounded by books made me happy. And I found the work fulfilling. Most of my colleagues were college graduates, and I was sometimes mocked for being just a high school graduate. However, as a voracious reader who devours over 1,000 books a year, I had confidence in my writing and vocabulary skills. Thanks to my efforts and results, I was eventually assigned to work with a prominent author. Thanks to my dedication and ability to mentor others, I became a chief editor at the young age of 30. And then, in the spring of my 5th year as chief editor, it was once again time for the arrival of new hires. Most of the time, the new hires were college graduates, but occasionally, someone like me, straight out of high school, would join. This year, there was one such person, and I already felt a sense of connection to them. "Nice to meet you, I'm Madison. I'm 18 years old and still inexperienced. But I'll do my best to build great relationships with the authors I'll be working with. I look forward to working with all of you." When I realized she was 18, I thought to myself, so, she's also a high school graduate, just like me. But when I looked at her face, I saw that she was far more mature and beautiful than I'd expect for someone her age. I could tell my team was equally impressed, as they took one look at her and murmured, "Oh," in admiration. While admiration was fine, some of the male employees started favoring Madison to win her approval. This favoritism quickly earned resentment from the female employees, who began treating Madison coldly. Although Madison herself had done nothing wrong, a hostility persisted. She didn't talk back, which only fueled the jealousy. "She's so full of herself because she's beautiful," some female employees whispered. "She probably thinks we're all beneath her." Megan, the only one assigned to mentor Madison, treated her kindly and often stood up to the female employees who acted coldly toward her. However, the harassment didn't stop, and Megan often worried, saying, "I hope Madison is okay." It was true that Madison was beautiful, but favoritism would only cause problems, so I had spoken to the male employees about it several times. Even so, the female employees' attacks didn't let up. That said, their actions never crossed a line that could be addressed formally. But they were so underhanded and insidious that it left me feeling frustrated as we headed toward the end of the year. While I was busy with year-end tasks, Henry approached me. "James, great work. Why is the end of the year always so busy?" "Oh, right. By the way, we're planning a year-end party to celebrate everyone's hard work this year. Would you like to join us?" Henry, a slightly over-the-top but energetic junior who brings a lively atmosphere to the workplace, invited me to the year-end party. "Sounds good. Count me in," I replied with a smile. "Oh, you've got to come too, Meg." "Wait, me too?" "I still have a pile of work to finish, so I'll probably be late, but sure, I'll go." "That's the spirit. Always up for a good time, huh?" Henry calls Megan Meg and looks up to her as a senior employee. If she joins the year-end party, it's sure to be a lively and cheerful gathering. That evening, I had plans to go out for drinks with Matthew after work. Reflecting on it, I told him, "It's kind of surreal that the guy who used to quietly read books alone in the classroom is now going out for drinks with his team." I also mentioned that I had already been invited to the year-end party earlier that day. Matthew laughed and said, "James, you might come off as reserved at first, but once people get to know you, they realize you're reliable, easy to talk to, and great at your job." "It's no wonder. Smooth with the compliments, huh?" I joked, but I couldn't deny how much his words meant to me. The next day at work, the office was unusually restless. It wasn't out of the ordinary for things to be bustling, but this felt different, off, even. I was feeling a bit uneasy when Megan suddenly called me over, saying, "James, can I talk to you for a moment?" She then led me to a quiet spot where no one else was around. Actually, there was some trouble between Henry and Madison earlier. Apparently, Henry had asked Madison, "Why don't we sneak out of the year-end party and go for drinks, just the two of us?" The favoritism toward Madison had all started because of Henry, and everyone in the team had already noticed he had feelings for her. But it seems Madison firmly rejected him. Afterward, Henry reportedly left with a parting shot, saying something like, "You'll regret this," which left everyone murmuring, wondering if things were okay. Henry was popular and cheerful, known for going out drinking with women often. He probably hadn't expected to be turned down. Well, Henry is a bit of a clown sometimes. I'll talk to him and smooth things over. Although I told Megan as much, I ended up so swamped with work that I didn't have time to follow up. Before I knew it, it was already the day of the year-end party. As expected, the workload was heavy at the end of the year, and I had to work overtime, meaning I would arrive late to the party. Henry had offered to help, but I told him, "You're the organizer this time, right? Don't worry, I'll wrap this up soon. Go on ahead and get things going at the party." Megan, who was also staying late for a separate task, eventually finished and said, "Finally done." "Wait, James, you're still here? Let me help you." I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "I'm part of the late-night crew too. It's not a big deal. Besides, going to the party alone would be awkward. Let's just finish up and go together." Grateful for her help, I accepted. As we worked, Megan brought up her concerns about Madison. She's being left out by the other female employees in the office. She's new to the city and doesn't seem too bothered on the surface, but she must feel lonely deep down. I'm worried about her. Yeah, that's been on my mind too. Megan's great at looking after people, so Madison isn't entirely without allies. But still, the more old-fashioned employees seem to be especially hostile toward her, and that's concerning. That said, in this day and age, saying the wrong thing could easily backfire, so I'm not sure how to handle this. I admitted, sharing my own concerns. We shared our frustrations as we worked, and before long, we were finally done. Since it had already been about an hour since the year-end party started, we hurried toward the venue. When we arrived at the Italian bar where the party was being held, I noticed a figure standing near the entrance. What are they doing out here on such a cold night? I wondered, just as I realized who it was. Megan said, "Madison? Out here in the freezing cold. Your face is so pale, and you're shaking. Why aren't you going inside?" As soon as Megan realized it was Madison, she rushed toward her. With a bitter smile, Madison explained, "Henry and some of the senior female colleagues told me. There's no way a country bumpkin with just a high school diploma belongs here. Why don't you wait outside?" As Madison spoke, her strained smile disappeared, and she began to cry. Megan, furious, exclaimed, "Those guys," and exchanged a glance with me. "James, I can go teach them a lesson, right?" she said, rolling up her sleeves, ready to storm into the venue at any moment. I quietly stopped her and said, "Leave this to me." With that, I picked up my phone and called someone. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Let's head inside for now, it's too cold out here." Madison hesitated. But Megan reassured her, and together, we walked into the bar. Inside, Henry was holding a microphone, leading the party with his usual energy. Noticing us, Henry ran over. "James, you're finally here. Oh, and you brought Meg too. Let's get the party going." Henry didn't seem to notice Madison, who was standing behind me and Megan. "Henry." I found Madison outside, freezing. Care to explain why? For a moment, Henry's face tensed, but then he grinned and said, "Oh, come on, James." She volunteered to wait outside as a guide for you guys. I told her to come inside because it was cold, but she insisted. One of the senior women who had helped organize the party chimed in. Crying just because things didn't go her way. What a drama queen. Exactly. Hiding behind the men like that. And we all know you turned down Henry's invitation. Honestly, these young women today. Picking men based on their salaries. So shallow. It seemed that Henry, upset by Madison's cold treatment toward him, had come up with this plan and decided to carry it out. I was so exasperated that I couldn't even bring myself to sigh. As I debated how to put him in his place, Henry added fuel to the fire, mocking Madison further. "You're so full of yourself just because you're a little pretty. Unlike a high school graduate like you, I worked hard, studied, and earned my place in this company. You didn't go to college because you hate studying, ended up here by sheer luck. And now you act all high and mighty? Who do you think you are?" Other male colleague, who had also been ignored by Madison and were clearly drunk, joined in, shouting, "Yeah, that's right. Acting all stuck up. Ha! With just a high school diploma, you should be wagging your tail and buttering up to your senior colleagues like us," they jeered. Clearly enjoying themselves. Megan looked like she was about to lose it and start causing a scene. I placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her, smiled quietly, and then snatched the microphone from Henry. "Well then, let's begin our high school graduates only year-end party," I announced. As I spoke calmly but with a clear tone of anger, the sudden shift in atmosphere caused the entire venue to fall silent. In the midst of the silence, Matthew appeared, accompanied by several executives from the company headquarters. "Mr. Henderson, why are you here?" and with the top executives from headquarters. Henry stood there, visibly flustered. Yes, Matthew is the CEO of the publishing company where I work. It's you, isn't it? The one excluding a new hire just because she's a high school graduate. Listen carefully. James, your supervisor, is a high school graduate. So is Megan, the senior you admire. And the executives here? All high school graduates. As for me, I took over this publishing company from my father, the previous CEO, 5 years ago. But I never even graduated high school. I dropped out. That's right, I only have a middle school diploma. Now, listen. It's true that college graduates probably worked hard and dedicated themselves to learning in order to gain a wide variety of knowledge. I'm not here to deny or diminish that effort. It's something that deserves respect. But that doesn't mean you have the right to look down on high school graduates. Sure, there may be people who dislike studying and avoided it. But that's not what we value at this company. At our company, we care about how much you value relationships, how much you can devote yourself to the people in front of you, and whether you can communicate effectively with the authors you work with. That has nothing to do with whether you're a high school or college graduate. We hired you because we believed you had that ability. That's why. When I heard about this incident from James, I was extremely disappointed. That's right. Matthew's passion for reading was recognized, and he was chosen to take over the business run by his mother's new husband. That business turned out to be this publishing company. As the successor, Matthew needed to begin training for his role as CEO immediately. Because of that, he dropped out of high school and began helping with the family business. Henry, having been reprimanded directly by Mr. Henderson, seemed deeply affected. Bowing his head, he apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." With the mood completely soured, the party couldn't continue. The employees who had already been enjoying themselves quietly left. But those of us involved decided to start fresh with a high school graduates-only gathering, just as I had announced. Although Madison and Megan seemed nervous at first, surrounded by the executives and Matthew, I reassured them that everyone here was kind and approachable. As time passed, both of them gradually became more comfortable with the atmosphere. Madison smiled brightly and said, "I've always eaten alone since I grew up in a single-mother household. This is my first time having such a lively meal. It's so much fun." 3 days after the party, however, Henry was still absent from work. At first, the other employees were saying things like, "I guess it's hard for him to show up at work after all that." But by the 3rd day, the rumors shifted to whether he might quit altogether. I, too, initially thought, it's got to be tough to be reprimanded directly by the CEO, and chose to overlook his unannounced absences. But I started to wonder if it was time to reach out to him. Then, that evening, I got a call from Henry. Noticing the incoming call, I quickly picked up. Right off the bat, he apologized, saying, "I'm sorry for being absent without notice." As I listened, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the call where he'd officially resign. However, what Henry said next was completely unexpected. Over the phone like this might not be the best way to ask, but could you assign me to Heather? Heather is a prominent author of historical fiction. Despite being young, Heather produces exceptional works that surpass even those of veteran authors. However, due to her youth, she has a much harsher attitude toward her editors and can be quite difficult to work with, offering a perspective that differs from that of seasoned writers. The previous editor assigned to Heather had recently resigned to care for their parents, leaving the position vacant. Finding someone to replace them had been a challenge. Heather was deeply attached to her previous editor and had been dismissive of anyone else who tried to approach her. I had already approached several people, but their responses were the same: "Heather? No way, there's no way I could handle that." And they all declined. Still, I wondered why Henry was suddenly so interested, so I asked him. He replied, I couldn't fully accept what Mr. Henderson said. So over the past 3 days, I met with several of my former classmates who started working right after high school. Some of them told me they took jobs because they hated studying and just wanted to live freely on their own terms with the money they earned. Others said they started working right away to support their single-parent households and help their families. I even met classmates who are chasing their dreams or have already started their own businesses. During those 4 years I spent focused on my studies in college, they were out there gaining real-world experience. Some of them have grown far beyond where I am now. It made me realize how wrong I was to dismiss high school graduates as incapable or unworthy. Then I thought about why I joined this publishing company in the first place. As imperfect as I am, I love novels and want to support authors. That's why, even if people say it's impossible, I want to take on the role as Heather's editor. Impressed by Henry's determination, and since no one else had agreed to the role, I decided to give him a chance and sent him to meet Heather. This tea is too weak. Now it's too lukewarm. Can't you see I'm in the middle of writing? Stop talking to me. Actually, stop wandering around, you're distracting me. Heather snapped at Henry again and again. But Henry didn't give up. He thoroughly read all of Heather's works and spoke to her, saying, "Oh, this part is a bit similar to a line from one of your previous works." He continued, "Heather, your talent for emotional descriptions is extraordinary. Especially in the 3rd volume of this series, when that character looks out the window. The emotions conveyed are just incredible. You've read all my historical novels? They're not exactly geared toward younger readers. I'm surprised. As an editor, I believe in dedicating myself to understanding the author through their work. Knowing your writing helps me understand you." As they continued their interactions, it seemed that Henry had managed to win Heather over. I liked my previous editor because she felt kind of like a mom. But Henry. What is it about him? He's a bit cheeky. But working on my projects with him feels more like creating something with a friend. It's actually pretty fun. I think I can keep working with him. So send Henry as my dedicated editor from now on, Heather personally requested. Henry and Heather became known as the ultimate odd team in the department. Henry rose through the ranks to become a mentor to younger editors as a specialist in historical fiction. He's still as cheeky as ever, but the recklessness he used to have is gone. Watching him now, admired by his juniors, I couldn't help but feel relieved that he didn't end up resigning back then. On the other hand, Madison grew even closer to Megan after that year-end party. And the two have even started going out for meals together in their personal time. Since they're both high school graduates and the closest in age within the company, it seems they quickly bonded. Thanks to Megan's guidance, Madison flourished at work and was soon entrusted with mentoring new hires herself. Watching Madison guide her juniors, Megan and I couldn't help but smile and feel a sense of pride. One day, I heard that our old elementary school was set to be demolished. Taking a short break from work, Matthew and I returned to our hometown to visit it one last time. We asked the former principal if we could look around for old time's sake, and he graciously agreed. Matthew and I headed to the library where we had spent so much time as kids. I sat in the seat I used to occupy often back then, facing Matthew as we talked. That day, back in the classroom, when you talked to me, it saved me. I didn't grow to hate people because of you. I'm truly grateful, Matthew. Thank you. I conveyed this to Matthew once again. Looking slightly embarrassed, Matthew replied, "An editor's job is all about building connections, after all." The wind flipped through the pages of an old book forgotten on the table, almost as if it was whispering, "Thank you for coming back." With the start of the new fiscal year and summer approaching, it was a quiet day in May. I decided to visit a bookstore and reached out to grab a novel. At that moment, I noticed another hand reaching for the same book from a different direction. Surprised, I quickly pulled my hand back and glanced over to see who it was. Megan? Oh, James. The book we both reached for was from a beloved children's series, a bestseller that had been ongoing for over 30 years. Though it was meant for kids, it held a special place in my heart, filled with nostalgia. I wondered if Megan had her own connection to it. Curious, I decided to ask directly. What a coincidence running into you on a day off. Do you like this series? Yes. When I was in elementary school, my parents divorced, and I stopped going to school for a while. During that time, this series gave me so much comfort. It's a special one for me. Really? Actually, it's the same for me. Wait, you too, James? Realizing we shared similar childhood experiences and a love for the same books, we couldn't stop talking. On our way back, we decided to stop by a cafe. Over coffee, we swapped stories from our childhoods and talked endlessly about our favorite novels. While chatting, I glanced out the cafe window and noticed a young girl sitting alone on a park bench, engrossed in a book. A moment later, I spotted a boy around her age walking toward her, holding the same book. The girl looked up and noticed him as he called out to her. Watching them, I couldn't help but think of my first meeting with Matthew. It's like they finally found each other, I murmured. Megan, catching my nostalgic tone, smiled at me silently. Today, I'm attending a wedding. Not just any wedding, it's Henry and Heather's wedding. James. Meg. Thank you for coming. Well, it's not every day a junior colleague gets married. But honestly, I never thought Henry would end up marrying Heather. Right? To think there was a time people thought he might quit. Henry, you really pulled through. Please don't remind me. I'm so sorry for those days. We exchanged such pleasant and lighthearted conversation. By the way, how did you manage to win over someone as difficult as Heather? Well, you see. With a wry smile, Henry began to explain. When Heather attended a local class reunion, she was mocked and repeatedly called a middle school dropout, and returned home feeling humiliated. She abruptly called Henry and demanded, "Come drink with me," dragging him along to join her drunken venting session. During that time, Henry opened up to Heather about his own mistakes, including how he had once looked down on high school graduates. He held nothing back as he shared his regrets. Heather had listened carefully before finally saying, "But the fact that you're here taking care of me shows you've learned from your mistakes. Doesn't it? It's impressive to not only recognize your failures but also to change. What I can't forgive are people who stick to their prejudices and refuse to question them. But if you've changed, you're not like them anymore." Moved by her words, Henry realized he admired her not only as an author but also as someone he wanted to protect. He confessed his feelings, and their relationship began. Heather's life hadn't been easy. Coming from a complicated family background, she had enrolled in an online high school but ultimately dropped out to pursue writing, which brought her the most joy. Her parents disowned her, forcing her to survive on her own. Though her talent eventually made her a best-selling author, her past left her guarded and often difficult to approach. But Henry's persistence melted her defenses, leading them to this moment, marriage. As the ceremony progressed, it was time for the bouquet toss. Henry leaned in and whispered something to Heather, making her laugh softly. When she tossed the bouquet, it sailed straight toward Megan, who caught it perfectly. "Meg, you're next. I know it might take a while with how clueless he is, but I'm rooting for you." Megan blushed as Henry waved his hand enthusiastically. I clapped along with everyone else, wondering if there was someone she had in mind. Megan glanced at me briefly, and it seemed like her face turned even redder. Was she embarrassed? At the time, I didn't notice anything. An editor's job is to connect people, fostering relationships and dedicating oneself fully to the person in front of them. The bonds created through books continue to bring people together, and from those connections, even more relationships are formed. spreading further and further. I reaffirmed my gratitude for every connection I have made and for those I will make in the future. Vowing to live with that sense of appreciation in my heart,